قناة الصعيد، قناة مصر السابعة.
Hello, my name is Kraft. I'm very pleased to be invited by the Gallery Around the World, directed by Ismail Bakr. Thank you so much for allowing me to present my work to you today. Thank you, Egyptian TV Channel 7, for this opportunity. I'd like to share a little bit about myself with you, and I'll do so by asking myself questions. So first, tell us about your background and what inspired you to choose ceramics. As a kid, I knew myself to be an artist, and I wanted to grow up to pursue art as my career and dedicate my life to this journey. I went to art camp in the summers and was fortunate to touch clay as well as create with many other materials from a young age. I'm originally from Tucson, Arizona, in the southwestern part of the United States. I went to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona for my undergraduate degrees, a BFA and a BSED art education. I would focus on painting and drawing for my degree, but I was quickly drawn to clay. The ceramics program there is very strong, especially for wood-fired ceramics. I was incredibly lucky to have great professors and classmates both in undergrad and again in grad school at the University of Montana, where I received my MFA. This is in Missoula, Montana, in the northwest of the United States. Much thanks to the creative atmosphere of these ceramic studios, I was driven to really develop my technical skills, gain a better understanding of the historical context of the work I was creating, and conceptually refine my inner voice so that what I had to say spoke to a larger audience. And next, tell us about your work. I create tableaus of layered memories, sensory reflections of past moments that surmount details and erode specific meanings. In my sculptural works, I tend to gravitate between abstraction and semi-abstracted realism. Often there are specific decipherable symbols or nouns apparent, but an exacting narrative is not explicit within each work. Pattern and botanical imagery are often present through organic abstraction of flora, fauna, and landscape. This pervades my interest in the physical being and is oriented towards the larger, grander enterprise interpreted by the individual self. My current work employs layered, multi-temperature oxidation firings. I've developed a brightly colored, multi-surfaced glaze palette that unifies the formal qualities of my work with its content. I incorporate monoprinting, mishima or inlay, image transfer, and other decorative treatments that further encourage a wide variety of surfaces. Concepts relating to the exploration above are also evident in my two-dimensional and mixed media works. I often reference craft as art and the DIY movement, and refer through the use and handling of materials in these works. I enjoy working in a variety of materials in order to portray a particular concept or idea. Making functional pottery is an important part of my creative practice. I love throwing at the wheel. I enjoy investigating forms for everyday use. I incorporate decorative treatments that encourage a wide variety of surfaces. Through drawing in relation to form, I have developed a personal iconography that extends to the archetypal symbol through my pots. Pattern and decoration seep into my sculptural forms by way of this venue. I find the connection between these seemingly separate endeavors continue to direct my research. More questions about my work. So much of my work features bright colors. What are influences and choices of color in the work? Well, I love color. Bright, vivid, candy-coated color. I often approach glazing by allowing my subconscious intuition to take over. I'm very well versed in color theory and design, and this knowledge hangs out in the back of my brain as I play. I tend to mix commercial glazes with underglazes and with my own glaze formulas. I create multi-dimensional complexity and depth on my ceramic surface. It's not uncommon that I'll multi-fire to develop further subtleties. When I monoprint, I like to layer my glazes and underglazes backwards on a piece of paper, really developing the thickness. I can also do so on plaster. That way, when the clay is fired, it oozes with the memory of the experience. With my functional ware, my pottery, I tend to create fine line work through mishima and inlay. as well as through resist. Pattern is a big part of my work. What influences the type of pattern that I put on a ceramic shape? There is not one specific source I look to for inspiration in collecting visual resources for pattern or art making on the whole. Oftentimes, my designs are simply free-form sketches. Other times, I look directly at sources such as pattern in nature, textile design, historic ceramics, and architecture. I'm just as interested in the purple veins on a green leaf as the intricate plaster detail of a crevice at the Alhambra. I enjoy working with a variety of materials to portray a concept. What types of materials do I incorporate into ceramic forms? Admittedly, clay is my comfort zone, and it's what I'm most drawn to work with, but I really enjoy playing with other materials when they conceptually and formally fit my idea. Some unexpected materials I've used included, but are not limited to, astroturf, laser-cut masonite, knitted and felted wool, all manner of papers, cork, rubber, metal, craft foam, plywood, air-dry clay, Fimo, wax, practically the kitchen sink. As I continue to work as an artist, it has become more essential to me that these materials that I use stand the test of time. I source high quality and durable materials regardless of what category they might fall in, being perfectly fine with blurring the vague lines between craft and art. I find now that I rely on layered glazing effects far more often than I used to when I mixed cold surfaces more often with glazed surfaces for my sculptural forms. I enjoy developing intricate and detailed designs on both my pottery and my sculptural forms. Now to share a little bit with you about my teaching. So for this question, what influenced you to become a professor? I always knew I wanted to be an artist, but wanting to share this love with art with others is what drew me to teaching. As an advanced BFA undergrad, before starting my art education degree, my professor asked me to teach a class for her while she was away unexpectedly. This was highly unusual, and I worked hard to do the very best I could to fill in. I quickly realized I really enjoyed teaching and that I hoped to become a ceramics professor myself one day. I'm so incredibly fortunate that after many years of pursuing this path, through grad school, a job at a museum, artist residencies, teaching in an elementary school, and a high school, and a community education program, this dream came true. I now teach at the University of North Georgia in Dahlonega, Georgia, and I've been teaching here for 10 years. What makes teaching worth it? The aha moments are just the awesomest. Here are examples. When I happen to witness a beginning student who's been putting the time in and really focusing their efforts to get centering at the wheel, which is a difficult task, and it clicks, all of a sudden, there's muscle memory that aligns in their inner understanding, and it's at least partly subconscious. Everything just connects. To see their sense of personal accomplishment spreads a smile across their face, and this is priceless for me. I'm also so proud of my graduates. It's wonderful to stay in touch and see where my students' creative paths lead. Often it's to very unexpected and exceptionally interesting places. So many of them continue to carve out paths in ceramics, for example, going on to run their own studios, running art centers, and moving into education themselves. I just love learning from my students. Advice I would have to give my students when they're trying to come up with their own voice or artistic style. Step 1, make. Don't overthink it while you're in the midst of your creative process. And if it was for an assignment for my students, I'd ask, really push themselves to take it to the next level. Don't just work on getting an A in my course. How can you really make something and really focus in on your project and on your progress as a professional artist? Can this assignment develop into a self-directed series? Step 2, if you have the luxury of time, let a piece sit for a few days or a few weeks. I do this with my own work. I take a break so that you can come back to that work with a fresh perspective. Step 3, give yourself some space to think and talk to yourself about the work. What's working in it? What do you think you would like to do differently next time? Self-critique your work. Talk to others about what you've made. Talk to your professors, your classmates, or if you're not working within a school, talk to anybody. Reach out to an artist you admire on Instagram and or other social media platforms. Ask if they'd be willing to give you a quick, objective feedback for your work. Ask people who are not in the field. So ask your grandmother. She may have unexpected insight, and consider your audience. It's always a good thing to continue to develop your network as an artist so that later you can come back to trusted colleagues and ask their advice when you need feedback on future work and progress as an artist. I think a great example for me of this is my connection to Ismail Bakr. We met in Denmark years ago, and now I'm here before you, getting to share with you my art. Step 4, write down points that stand out to you from this feedback and from your responses. Some of what is said may not resonate with you. Why? That critique may just be as important as what feels positive to you. Sketch is needed to fully flesh out your notes. As you continue to cull these critiques and responses together, your writing can help you to develop further understanding of your own personal direction, voice, and style. I do this with my own work. Sometimes it's really great to write about your work to have a better understanding of what it is you're trying to say to the world. As time passes, you'll naturally have a series of work you'll feel confident in. Go back through your notes on past feedback to develop an artist statement related to your current work. You might be surprised to find connections long forgotten between previous and recent work. I certainly do. And finally, repeat. Continue to make, then make some more. If you're taking nothing else from what I've just said, make. That's what I try to do. I try to make as much as I can. Hello, time to make a plate. So we're gonna start today with 4 pounds of clay, 3.5 to 4, a good size for a dinner plate. That's gonna be approximately 11.5 to 12 inches wet, and it will fire to cone 6 to become approximately 10 inches. That's a standard dinner plate. For the assignment, I'm also looking for you to make a lunch plate, and that's approximately 7 to 8 inches once glazed completed. So you're looking at about 10 inches approximately when wet. And that will be about 2.5 pounds. So for today, 4 pounds is what I have here. And plates are fun. You want to go with pretty wet clay. Don't bother with dry clay. That can work well when you're going tall, but for flat, for horizontal, wet is actually really nice. A lot about plates has to do with compression. You're going to hear me say that a lot during the demo. Compress, compress, compress. And at the end, it's about babysitting the plate. So the actual throwing is not that difficult. There's a ton of great YouTubes on plates, just like anything else. Feel free to try the different techniques, whatever appeals to you. I'm just going to show you a way. Here we go. So as usual, if you want, you can put a little bit of moisture. Moisture, I know that word, moisture. But a little bit, dampen your bat just a touch, but don't overdo it. And then the usual, slaying that clay down. It's a fair amount of clay. Your usual heel of the hand to start out, nothing different from what you're used to. And then remember, you're going to lock that clay down onto the bat. All right. With this much clay, I'm probably not going to start out at top speed. I'm just going to go a little bit slower with my initial centering. Now, theoretically, with platters and so forth, you can, in fact, pound to center. But generally speaking, I tend to still center all the way because I like to have the particles aligned all the way through. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to top speed. Centering my clay. And just what you're used to. So pushing out with my right hand if I'm on the left side of the wheel, my left hand pulling it back in, or vice versa if you're on the right hand side. And incrementally centering that clay. One kind of interesting thing about plates is you can be a little tiny bit off center and get away with it versus other forms because you can always come in and adjust. But I really do try to get it as centered as possible to start. Okay, so I've now gotten it to an approximate tuna can. And I am gonna then flatten it out further. And at this point, I'm gonna use my fist method to start to pull across. And when I do so, I'm actually not pulling straight across. I'm just gonna start to pull it a little bit of an angle up. So if I'm on the right side of the wheel, it's think for a minute, like this. And I just do this incrementally. I tend to get this little bit of a flare along the edge. I'm just going to lock that down. So it's just kind of an even pulling of the clay across, incrementally starting to flatten it out as I go. I'm just compressing. There's my first compressing in, and now moving back out again, and then a little bit as I go. So just starting to create that divot, that interior, and I'm already really conscious of trying to make sure in the end I'm going to have a nice flat form, and that I'm not getting a belly button in the center. So trying to just keep flat across, and then again, pulling it down as I go. Just want to show you guys, get rid of some of that gunk on the end so you can see what I'm doing. In fact, let me share this with you. If you are really off center here, you can literally take this tool and even like center it now. Sit a little bit, but just kind of as one more reason that I'm saying that you can actually a little bit fudge if you're a little off center with a plate. But again, long term, you really want to be centered. Okay, so I'm going to pull out again, but what I want to avoid is getting really thin. With all the other forms that we make, you're always hearing me say, go thinner, go thinner. Not with the plates. You actually want to leave plenty of room for trimming. So much of it ends up being in the trimming. I like to go back and forth and really compress with my fingers as well. Okay, just give you guys a sense of our Width currently we are at about just under 10. So that would be reasonable in relation to a lunch plate, maybe a little wide for a lunch plate, but in a good spot. So I'm gonna go ahead now and pull out just a touch more because I'm trying to get closer to that like 11 and a half, even up into 12. But while not losing the thickness below. Really, you can get a lot of width in one pull. Okay, let's take a look at that to make sure I'm in the same point range. Okay. And really, truly, all of this is compressing that clay down as I'm moving forward. All right. So you've got your thickness. If you can, even keep it up into this range. You really don't want to get super thin here. And then really truly just get in there, compress, whether it's with your sponge, whether it's with your finger, what have you. Okay. And so now basically this is a plate form here. It depends on what you're looking for in that final form, whether you want to have a bit more of a dish with a flanges and walls, or whether you want it to be just flat across. It's a little bit thick, but this is possible in relation to a plate. But here's what I tend to do more. You can do this with a sponge. Let's do it this way. So I'm going to take this tool and I'm going to go flip it and go up and actually create an angle in the form. And I'm actually going to take it a little higher than what I want for the final angle in the cone 6. So I'm going to go up. And what I basically did was decide about how high up, by taking that into the side, how high up I wanted it. And it does, you end up with a little bit of clay loss, but that's okay. And it just kind of lifts that edge. And then I'm just going to come in, smooth that edge. Like if you wanted to make a pie dish, this would be a way to do it as well. And now I'm basically going to establish this flange, but I need to be careful as I do so. I want to be careful right at this, right in there, right in that point is very weak between the base and the flange. So even if my fingers run across the form, once it gets right into here, I've got to make sure that it's less pressure and then moving up into the flange. Here we are. Just kind of lightly running in now, and then doing just a light bit of a pull to start to create a little bit more of a lips there. Always do compress that lip. And then before I get too much further, I'm going to clean up all this gunk below here. So a little earlier in my process than I would in a normal, on a different sort of a form, where you usually clean that gunk up at the end to get ready for trimming. Instead, I'm doing that now, earlier in the process. And that's because I have that flange lifted now, so I won't have to climb in there later to try to get it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and again, I don't want to overdo this. Just maybe 1 or 2 more pulls up. You don't want to end up with a really thin flange here. If you think about it just in relation to functionality of a form, when someone has this running in through their dishwasher, you don't want it so thick that it's impossible to use, but you don't want it so thin that it's just breaking off very quickly in there when they're washing that dish. So I like to have a little bit of girth to it. And then main thing with plates is you're really doing so much in the trimming. So unlike those other forms, you're just going to trim away a ton of it. Okay. And so that's the basics of the plate form. And you're just at this point a little bit, it's more about decoration. So, you know, do you want to split the rim? Do you want it to be just a solid plain sort of like, this is kind of a pasta bowl sort of a shape right now? you're really going to do a lot of the trimming later because you've got this tall thickness at the bottom towards the foot. So you're waiting on that. I do really want to suggest that you are thinking though about function. So like either it's nice and smooth in the interior, or if there's decoration or design that you're thinking about how that's going to relate as a fork scrapes across it. And again, just thickening up that lip in some regard. Maybe even thinking about how glaze is going to drip, etc. Alrighty, so that is the basics of a plate. Oh, it just got a little bit funky in there. That's your basics. And at this point, you need to really be careful about removing it from the wheel. On these wheels, I do run the wire through it, but if you're at one of the other kind of wheels where you have a barrier, I'll even remove it from the wheel before running my wire tool through it. And when I do, you've really got to be careful to keep that flat against the bat, because your wire is going to want to lift up in the middle. It's one more reason to make sure to have a nice thick width to your plate. Much better that than getting stuck and having a hole in it. So, main thing, compress, and babysitting. Let me tell you about that. Okay. So when this guy comes off the wheel, you're generally going to need to let him sit. They often will take a little bit longer to dry. If you use a masonite bat, they'll tend to dry a little bit more evenly, so that's your choice. I tend to find that I'm going to need to pass through it while it's drying with my wire tool. That's going to help when it's shrinking. It's going to want to shrink inward, and if it's stuck to the bat, it's going to crack. So if you can come in between while it's still setting up towards being able to flip it and run your wire tool through it, that'll help. Also, when you flip it, you'll want to wait for it to get pretty hard, like a good frozen butter, leather hard, and then put another bat on top of it, flip it. If you find that it's curving on the interior, on the bottom, flip it back over, pat it down, and let it dry a little more. Thank you, Egyptian TV, Channel 7, and Ismail Bakr for allowing me to share my work with you today. It's been lovely visiting with you, and I wish you all the very, very best. Thank you to all the audience who has watched this program today. Goodbye.